Hello, and a very warm welcome to This Woman's Work, a space where you can hear and read about some amazing women, the fantastic jobs they do, and the paths that have led them to where they are today.
I went on maternity leave, and when I got back to work, I was told that the job wasn't there for me anymore and that I would have to do a different job.
Yeah.
Now, bearing in mind, I'd just spent 17 years building up a career in purpose, politics, regulation, government, business. This was all I'd ever wanted to do. And to be told that that job wasn't there anymore and I'd have to do something else kind of broke me a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was not in that position. And again,
because also at the same time, and I've had this chat with many women, when you've just had kids, you are a little bit like, you're
at
not
your lowest
losing
ebb.
yourself. That's not the right thing. But you're not your old you, are you? So you're also trying to figure out who on earth you are.
Yeah, you're
anymore.
sleep deprived.
You're kind of like what your old life. Yeah, you're responsible. So, and in many ways, you are on the back burner now because these two things are way more important than you.
Yeah.
So that affects your own identity.
Yeah.
And then to be told that, which also affects your identity.
Yeah.
That is a blow.
Yeah, I took that quite hard.
Yeah.
In terms of the hyperactivity, I wasn't a child that was bouncing off the walls, which is like the stereotypical view, I suppose, because it was combined. But I would do things like pretend I had music lessons when I didn't, because it meant I could leave the classroom and go walking around. It was actually on another site because there were two schools on one site, and I'd walk over to the school, have a little wander around and come back again.
Do you tell your teacher
I'm going for a music lesson? I could do that like with every lesson I had on my music lesson day.
Did you have music lessons?
I did have the music lesson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You hadn't completely fabricated.
No, but I just
didn't have them then.
No. Yeah, to be yourself,
and be aware of what
you don't have
what lights your fire, what doesn't, that kind of thing.
If you're trying to be somebody that you're not, that's not right. There's something amiss. That's not the way. You are precious for who you are.
Yeah.
And that is more than enough. And be you, don't try and be somebody else.
The creativity is more interesting when you've got more women in the room. And they're the different questions and different approaches and a lot more interesting rather than men appear. I do quite a lot of farmer meetings where you have all male audiences, and they're always really challenging in terms of questions or that willingness to be vulnerable.
The only woman in
there? It's the speaker, which is just normal.
Yeah.
But the ability to be vulnerable in that room is impossible. We actually get women in, the vulnerability starts to actually provide some really interesting conversations and change happening. So we can build it in, and as they get more confident with me, the vulnerability starts. But initially, it is very much we're all here.
Combative.
Oh, and just
alpha male.
Yeah. The bit that irritates me currently is if you look at the Farmers Weekly, there's a big campaign that's been run by Farmers Weekly about women in agriculture being led by a man. Like, in what world? And there's also what tends to happen is they have Instagram posts that are 20-something-year-old women with shorts sitting on a silage clamp. That isn't representing women in agriculture.
No.
As my friend said, it's not representing Brenda who's turned up covered in shit because she's been feeding calves.
Yeah.
It definitely is a more female-heavy profession.
Is it?
So traditionally, and we're talking probably 40, 50 years ago now, it was very male-dominated, but it's absolutely a switch. So a standard year for us at the moment has about 160 pupils, and probably 20 to 30 of those are boys, the rest are girls.
How interesting.
So it's, very female-dominant now.
Gosh, do you know why?
I think there's a few reasons. One reason is that we don't get paid as much as, say, a doctor or a dentist or someone who would do maths and therefore go into business or accounting, that kind of thing. So boys seem to want to get paid more.
Be driven more by money and financially.
Yeah, absolutely. And
therefore, you know, they're just not as interested in, because we do as much work and possibly even more kind of qualifications to get to where we need to be.
So I was groomed by a college lecturer. So I was 16, so people can argue, well, you know, you were 16, but I was very young, really, still a child in my eyes, and I didn't know what he was doing. So he was a college lecturer, and he apparently did this with lots of girls, and I just didn't know. I was very naive as well. Didn't know anything about boys, never had a boyfriend, I didn't know what was going on. Anyway, so I had that experience, but I didn't know it was bad until my early 30s when I was doing a course, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what he did to me. And when I look back, I think, actually, that was horrific what happened to me. And I think that started my depression and my anxiety.
It's only been in the last 10 or 15 years where these kind of stories about celebrating female empowerment, about celebrating female leadership, understanding that actually in female-led businesses, female-led startups, you only get a fraction of the funding available to male-led startups. And those statistics are out there now.
Oh my God,
the statistic
don't
is
tell
like
me
2% or something. It's really depressing. But
They
those
get
things,
2% the same funding.
female-led businesses, female founders get 2% of the VC funding available globally. That's a stat. It's depressing.
I don't know if I want to know that.
I know, it's when you realise that, and like, well, hang on, we're still doing
There's
all right.
a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of work to do, but the fact is that it's now being spoken about. And recognising the elephant in the room is the first step. I would work long hours, I was travelling quite a bit, then I put a stop to the travelling, but I was still working in a fairly high pressured role, expected to deliver. And one of the things was like, you know, I would drop my son off to nursery at about 7:30 in the morning, pick him up at about 6:30 in the evening. I'd see him for about an hour and then put him to bed. And I remember thinking, like, because both my husband and my mum, they were both stay-at-home mums, 100% always at home. And I knew I didn't want to be one of them, but I still wanted to be a present parent.
Yeah.
And I used to have this persistent guilt. And again, I think this is it's certainly in our home, it's a gender-specific thing, because I have mum guilt.
Oh, God,
My husband does not have dad guilt.
No.
He's like, oh, suck it in, they'll be fine. Whereas I'll be like, you know, if I see my child's crying face in the morning, I'll see that for the whole day.
Yes.
Up until about the age of 10 or 11, like, I believed everybody's life was like my home life.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't talk about it. And it was actually when a friend, you know, kind of said to me, like, we were just being a little bit mischievous at school. I can't remember what we were doing. And I said something like, oh, God, you know, like, my dad would beat me if he found out. And she went, your dad would beat you? And I was just like, yeah. And it was just in that moment, the way she looked, I just knew, like, oh, my goodness, like, maybe I've said something like, I shouldn't.
Yeah.
And that's when it all made sense, you know, like those things that you get told, that I say I'm going to own that. I used to get told at home, you know, what happens in this house stays in this house. We don't talk our business, you know, those kind of things. And it was like in that moment, the way she looked at me, it just like all made sense. Like, oh my goodness. And then she said, like, in a, you know, like really concerned fashion, like, what, he would really like do something to you? And I just went, oh no, you know, like I'm just sort of saying,
so
like,
your
because
brain
we're being,
adjusted,
you know, and it was like in that moment, you know, when like then the lies began, because I understood, like, oh wow,
This could get me into a lot of trouble if I
because different people have like so many different experiences of even like
and hold ups and
what sex is, trauma, not even realising that they have been like sexually traumatised or sexually conditioned. You know, and one of the things that I came to realise like through this training was that my like sexual archetype is the performer. I'll put on a show in the bedroom, like,
I feel that.
Like you wouldn't believe, you know, and the guy's like loving life, and I'm just there like, I mean, it's all right.
I tried everything. I wasn't going to diet. I was tried all the classes. I was running, just couldn't get me back. And for me, my body was, you know, really pre-children. It was my thing. You know, as you know, we've spoken before, and I did have some, you know, different weight when I was in my late teens through some struggles, put on lots of weight, and then lost all that weight and was the opposite, and had other struggles. So diet for me is disordered eating. And for me, it's got to be about, you know, a healthy approach for food, which is really important because I've got 2 daughters. And what you put into your body is what you are, what you eat. Had the children, obviously loved that, but there was there's just, it's not that there weren't enough, it was just, there's just always an itch, right?
Yeah.
And it's not, and you can't feel, there's only so much time you can do with that, you can fill with exercise, reading books, and, you know, be at home being a mum, and you lose your identity. I think that is the thing.
Yeah.
It's not that you don't want to have your identity as a mum, but you lose your identity of who you were prior to wife, mum.
Yeah, it's who. I couldn't agree more.
My head chef at the time, Steve, was half German, half Canadian.
Oh, another half German.
Yes, and he did not want this woman in his kitchen at all.
And were you his number two then?
No, so I had just been employed as a chef de partie.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But he did not want a woman in his kitchen.
Oh, no.
So there was about 10 or 15 of us in the kitchen. So for the first 3 months during service, when we were on the hotline, I was doing meat and fish.
Yeah.
Right? So I was here cooking. The hot plate was here where you'd plate everything, which is where Steve would be. And then next to Steve was Brent, who was his sous chef, who was from the UK.
Right.
This chef didn't speak to me for 3 months. I worked
Like nothing.
alongside him for 3. He would tell Brent that he needed this food, and I was just like, and I was quite disheartening at times.
In the 2 offices that I sort of worked in previously, there was probably, I don't know, probably still less than 25%.
Yeah.
Even in the London
Still
offices.
very male.
Yeah.
I reckon it still would be. I
think the site side, you notice it more.
Yeah.
I did sneak in at the start of an MVQ in trowel skills just to back up my...
Have some creds.
Yeah. I've done woodwork sort of joinery evening class as well.
Yeah, so you can...
I mean, I love making stuff anyway, but it's nice to have that bit of knowledge that people maybe don't expect.
And do you think you're doing that more as a woman, though, if you're honest?
Yes.
Rather than, like, your male counterparts wouldn't feel they need to do it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Because you feel like on a job or something, you're going to have to prove yourself a little bit more than...
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
No, but it was 3 weeks into the role that Bailey's dad died.
Yeah.
So then my priorities completely changed. So going from, I'm going to nail it here, I'm going to get right to the top, to I just need to survive and make sure my son's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do enough to be okay here.
How old was Bailey then?
8.
Yeah. So he aware?
Yes.
Really
yeah,
aware.
absolutely. And he used to spend half of his time with his dad, half of his time with me. So super close relationships with both of us. And 3 weeks into such a massive role to say it derailed my focus is an understatement, but I couldn't let that happen outwardly.
You must have told them, though.
I did. I told them, and I took 2 weeks off, and then I was straight back and never spoke about it again, really.
Oh my god!
Because I didn't know these people.
No,
I had built no relationships
and no reputation, really.
No reputation, no relationships established. You've just got to get on, and you've got to do it well.
So you've got the work opportunity of your life.
Absolutely.
Oh, Annie, gosh.
Yeah.
Self-belief and doubt. We talked about imposter syndrome. She said, no matter how, much you're doubting yourself, there's a mediocre man out there that thinks he's bossing you.
100% true.
And it really made me laugh. I want to get that put on a T-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I see it all the time.
Yeah, I bet you do.
But what grates me the older I get is that those mediocre men also have excellent women at home running all of the other elements.
Oh, yes.
And so
all they've got to do is be mediocre.
Correct.
And they're still mediocre.
Right, precisely. Which is why I'm saying please don't be intimidated by that, because I'll still go toe-to-toe with them, but yet I do all of the childcare, upbringing, as in, like, I'm everything for Bailey, I'm both parents, I'm all of the things, I do all of the travel, where they have everything laid on for them. So I wouldn't want people to be intimidated by that or worry about going into those environments.
So I've worked for a few men that have put me into brilliant jobs, but I think it's always been women in my career
that have helped me make those moves that I probably wouldn't have made without encouragement and sponsorship. So I think it's been women that have gone, no, I think you should do this, and kind of pushed me out of that, pushed me out of the safe zone, through the imposter zone, and doing something that probably felt uncomfortable but supported me. And that programme went really well, and we were spending millions on a new piece of tech. And unusually, this programme came in on time and under budget, which is really unusual for tech projects. So that gave me a little bit of a positive reputation, I think. And really unusually, the 5 people working on that programme were all female, had this real female team.
Wow.
So it was amazing.
So within a division, you were managing a change
shift.
I
got loads of project managers in, and but we were a real dynamic bunch. And I think we got the real emotional and rational balance right with the teams we were moving through it, and did a lot of problem solving. So there's a huge amount of female energy on that programme, and I sometimes go, oh, I wonder whether that's why it came in on time and under budget. I don't know. I'd love someone to tell me. But a lot of the partners we were working with were really surprised it was an all-female team.
At Salesforce, I became a leader.
Okay, interesting.
And that's when I started to reflect more on myself and what kind of leader do I want to be.
And that was very much of the culture as well.
That's the culture. And I think that's it as well.
So they encouraged it.
They encouraged it. They put you on the right training. They put you on training that makes you step back and reflect a bit more. There's lots of things that I learned, but the biggest thing that's changed me as a person was being transparent about my dyslexia.
Okay.
So I had hidden it.
Yeah.
Up until that point, I had hidden it. It was like this huge...
Well, you'd almost made a joke about spelling or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just...
You'd learned probably little things that you could say or do.
I would pore over my emails at times, reading and oh, is it right? Is it spelt right? Is it... Be purposeful in the decisions you make. Make the right decisions based not just on a title of a job, but will you thrive in that environment? Is that the right environment for you to thrive? Is your personal life as a person?
Yeah.
Because your work will become latter. That will follow. If you're happy and you are achieving and you're leading on your strengths,
like you're going to boss it.
You'll boss it.
Yeah.
Because you're leading with your strengths and your the work will just come.
Yeah, the doors will open. That was it. We were talking about paths and stuff.
Yeah. So think of yourself and be purposeful with where you will thrive and your strengths. Know yourself, know your strengths, and lead with that.
About 33 weeks pregnant at that point. Went back
heavily pregnant,
went back to the hospital at lunchtime to write up my notes, and I looked at my phone and I'd had about 20 missed calls from my GP and my husband, and I thought, what on earth is going on? And I rang them and they said, oh, you must go, we've got some test results back, you must go to the hospital now. And I said, well, I can't, I'm in the middle of a clinic, I can't leave. And so my GP rang me and said, no, you need to leave now and don't go home, go straight. And they said, oh, don't drive a car. I was in Northamptonshire and I had to get to Leicester, and I said, well, I need to drive my car. I can't not drive my car. I need my car.
Oh my gosh, what a state of panic to put you in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I went from work, so I ran the clinic in the morning, and by the afternoon I was seriously ill. By the evening I couldn't even stand up, and I had my child, my son was born via emergency C-section under a general anaesthetic that night. They said, you've been such a big part of our life for the last 2 years and you've made such a difference to us. We wanted to say thank you.
Oh my God.
I love that. Yeah. And I get that. I do get that a lot. I get lots of thank you cards saying, do you know what, you have changed. You've given our child a way of communicating, and we can now communicate with our child, we can now understand our child, and you've changed their life and you've changed our life. So
we just invested in a lot of play equipment before lockdown, so it was just like, oh my God.
It arrived, I think, the day after
Yeah.
we were told to close. We had this massive delivery of all this beautiful new equipment. It was just heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And at that point, we didn't know whether we were going to get any kind of financial support, so it was really desperate.
Well, and I don't think, and even what you did get wasn't a lot, really, was it?
No, we survived.
The whole thing was just chaos, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I truly believe that anybody can do anything that they put their mind to. I really believe that. You don't ever doubt yourself. And I have doubted myself. But you just have to work out. Everything just works out in the end.
So that hasn't changed at all?
Not the verbal side of things, not at all. And that's what my friend has sort of struggled with, but with an older generation of person, is inappropriate comments, which are just so uncomfortable. When it's like, you could be my dad. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so I was chatting to this lady at work, and she basically said that women are less likely to negotiate pay than men. What? Yeah. So I found that so interesting. So
because we're almost just grateful to get the bloody job.
As in, yeah, as in, like, we'll just sort of be a bit more like, oh, okay, like that is what it is. Like, that's
people
fine.
pleasing.
Yeah, literally, like exactly that, and that's exactly what she said. Whereas a guy is more likely to be like, would you entertain like this number, for example, and then they negotiate it back or whatever, which is probably a contribution as to why like the gender pay gap is still such a thing as well. I have this big fear that I'm loving my job right now, but all I will amount to being is a mum and a wife maybe one day.
Yeah.
Just because of all of the stuff that you keep hearing. It's like how in this day and age do you progress? Like, do you have to give things up, or can you do it all, or all of this kind of stuff?
So you're not seeing enough dialogue for you from women or from anyone telling you how to make it work.
And maybe I'm not looking for it enough.